and welcome to The Healing Half. My name is Mickey Spear. I am a grief author, musician, and talk show host. And The Healing Half is a quick 30-minute show where we get to spend every Tuesday together, where we get to learn how to address our own wounds, as well as how to help others with theirs. And tonight's show, you guys, I am so excited about. It's called Two Perspectives: Remarriage and Kids. And my wonderful guest, who you have met before, she's going to come on and kind of share her story of what it was like to be a young mom, widowed, and getting into all that remarriage and that stuff from her perspective. And then I'm actually going to share my perspective of what it was like to have a parent date. And I'm going to bring Lyn on in just a second, and we can talk to you about our goals and what we're going to be covering really quickly. So just know we've got an information-packed show, because I feel like a lot of people are curious about this topic. When somebody dies and then there's remarriage start to be talked about, there's a lot of curiosity about, like, well, what about the kids? What about this? Da, da, da. And I'm just really hopeful that tonight's show, and as with hopefully all my shows, offers a little bit of insight, healing, and wisdom for whether you need it yourself or if you have a friend going through that. But before we jump in, I've got two quick things to run by you. The first is, who am I and why on earth am I talking about this? Well, my name is Mickey Spear. I am it doesn't really matter how old I am, but I'm 28 years old. But my mom passed away when I was 13 years old from cancer. And I guess what's relevant for tonight's story, my dad got married a couple years after that, but he started dating, I think, within the year of when she passed away. So we're going to dive all into that in just a second. But what I wanted to do is really drive the point home that I don't have all the answers. You know, I spent 10 years almost after my mom died, like avoiding feeling, pushing away anybody who wanted to talk about it. I very much bought into the lie that if I am weak, weakness is crying, and grieving is not for the strong. And I just really bought into that oldest child, I have to do everything right and be perfect mentality. And obviously that's not true about grief. And my grief eventually caught up to me. My life started to crumble all around in every different aspect. And I realized I had so much emotional trauma that I wasn't going through. And so I finally started to go through it. And man, life is so much sweeter on the other side of processing hard emotions. So I just wanted to start a show where we get to come together and talk about griefs of all kinds. Last week, we talked about Dia de los Muertos and non-death losses. And we talk about divorce and depression and anxiety and drug use. And there's so many things that need healing that I'm just so excited for you to be here and support the show. And if you haven't yet, head on over to mickeySpear.com, where you can sign up for my weekly resource email, where you will get one email a week, and only one email a week, where you will oftentimes get resources in raffle. You know, last week we gave away a book for free. I often will talk about my music and send out other free things in there. And I just want to send out resources for you. So if you haven't yet, make sure you head to mickeySpear.com and sign up for that. And then the last thing that I wanted to kind of put on your radar is my show is transitioning. We're going to do a couple more live ones to kind of get us through the end of 2021. But then in 2022, we're actually turning the show into a podcast. So you'll still see me all over social media doing live music performances, talking. You can't get me to shut up. So trust me, I'll still be talking, but the show will not be in this format afterwards, after 2021. So while we're here, I just wanted to let you know that podcast is going to be a little bit of an overlap time, where we're going to have some live shows happen, and previous recordings of the show are going to be available on Spotify, Apple. There's a lot of ways to listen to podcasts, iHeartRadio, lots of good stuff. So just know that that's what's happening. That's the big transition, the big change. But as we wrap up 2021, I would love to hear how I can help support you. So if you have a grief group or anything like that could use a guest musician or a guest speaker, please just let me know. I've got several on the calendar already. It's just a little charity I like to do for the end of the year. I can play whatever songs that you want me to that I've put out, or some Christmas tunes. So that's all I'm going to say. But we do have, again, this podcast coming out. So make sure you're on my email list so you can get the trailer for that. It's coming out live here in just a second. And I can't wait for you to kind of hear some of the episodes maybe from the past, but in a repurposed, repositioned way. Woo! That was a lot. Okay, we're moving on because we've got such an amazing guest here. I cannot wait for you guys to see Lyn. Lyn, welcome back onto the show. It is so good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Like always, I love being here. And yes, you should take advantage of Mickey's offering to come and perform. I believe you came
Oh,
last year to our Modern Widows Club group in Minneapolis via Zoom and performed and had a little sing along. It was a lot of fun.
oh, you are so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, it was such a blast, and I just love doing it and connecting with people because holidays are hard, and I think that's kind of a nice transition into what we're going to be talking about. Is there's a lot of grief coming up with the holidays and stuff, and one of the things that everybody loves to talk about is when somebody passes away, who's getting remarried, how does it affect the kids, and that's going to come up in the holiday season. So we'll talk all about that. So this what I'm trying to say is this conversation is very relevant for all the family meetings that are about to happen.
Absolutely.
So, but before we get to all the good content of these two perspectives that we're bringing together today, Lyn, do you mind just introducing yourself to the audience?
Sure. So I've seen you all before, maybe. I'm Lyn Kienholz, and I am a remarried widowed mom. I live in a suburb of Minneapolis, and I have a blended family with 6 kids now. I had 3 biological kids and 3 bonus kids. So I've been widowed for 10 years and been remarried for 8. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
a
Thank
little
you.
bit about it without spilling
Yeah.
too much more about what we're going to talk about.
We've got the secrets coming up. I'm just kidding.
Good
But
stuff.
thank you so much. And if you guys haven't watched Lyn's previous episodes, oh my gosh, go back and watch them. They are some of the most popular ones that have been on the show. Truly, like the highest views, highest comments. So you know how to
I
start a
always wanted to be
conversation.
popular, and here I finally am. All because I was widowed. But things
Potato,
in life,
potato, right?
how it works.
That's showbiz. No, I'm just kidding. That's
Right, it's
terrible.
how it works.
Terrible joke. Okay, moving on. So again, you guys, it is so good to be here. So Lyn's going to be sharing her perspective, and then I'm kind of coming from the perspective of someone whose parent is dating and got remarried. And I'll share a little bit more as our thing goes on. But we just wanted to reinstate our goal a little bit. Again, this is to give wisdom to both sides. So if you're a child who lost a parent, whether you're in your teenage years or in your 20s or 30s, whenever, it can still be awkward when your parent starts dating again. So we want to make sure you are getting some support. Vice versa, if you are a widowed person and you are finding yourself dating, you've got kids at home, Lyn's here to kind of offer some wisdom on that. And our goal is to hopefully help everybody, whether you're in one of our situations or you just know somebody, to just gain perspective. And of course, this is a no shame zone. So the last little thing that I wanted to say is, my dad got remarried, oh my gosh, 12, a long time ago, and they're no longer together. That's part of the story. But so it's like you can't change the past, and I think that's like the important thing is if we say anything, this is just our perspective, our opinions, take it with a grain of salt. But if we say anything that's making you feel guilty about something you've said or done in the past, let it go. All you can do is move forward. Lynn, is there anything you'd like to kind of add to that with our goal for tonight?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is that always my experience, your experience is just that. There are experiences. It doesn't mean that we can't, there might be a nugget of knowledge or a nugget of information that the listeners can take and use. But just because one of us had a certain experience doesn't mean that that's the experience for all. Just like in
Right.
everything in your loss, and for widows especially, but for grieving kids too. Somebody's perspective is not going to be the same as yours. So I think it's really important just to take the nuggets that are you find knowledge, helpful and good for you, and leave the rest. So,
Leave the rest. I love that. Thank you so much. So I'm going to kick it off by asking you a question first.
all right.
And it's kind of more of just like laying the foundation.
Okay.
A lot of kids, myself included, back when I was in middle school, don't understand why a parent would start wanting to date again. They feel like their deceased parent is maybe being replaced. And in a way, and I just can speak from my own experience because I didn't understand the situation, it very much felt like my dad no longer cared about my mom and that their love was meaningless and that, oh, he must not have loved her because he's moving on. So I guess what would you say to that, just to kind of lay the foundation of why does a parent start dating ever, I guess?
Well, in the wise words of my 3-year-old, 2 months after her dad died, when you go on a date, mom, you need to wear a short skirt and high heels. So I was already being told to go on dates by a
Oh,
3-year-old. Now
that's
she
so
doesn't
cute.
remember this, and she tells me, she's like, "I didn't say that." I'm like, "Yeah, you did." And it was quite comical because at the time I wasn't even hadn't even crossed my mind to go on a date. But little did I know, about a month later, I would be going on my first date. After my kid passed. So I mean, I think when it comes to dating and dealing with just the topic in general is really, really complicated because everybody's relationships are different. Maybe you had a great marriage, and so maybe you're looking to still fulfill some sort of
Mm,
desire to have a partner in your life because it doesn't mean you miss that person any less. I mean, let me be very, very clear. I don't believe that there is a person out there that chooses to date or repartner in whatever time frame they choose to do it in, loves their late spouse any less than they
mm,
did before. Because I got that a lot, right? Well, you must not have really loved Mike that much either. Oh, no,
right.
that was the furthest thing. But I was 33, and for me, and maybe for your dad too, a huge chunk of my younger years, right, were spent either starting to raise my children, but then I had a sick spouse. And I just wanted to be like all my friends and have a husband or a significant other or a partner to share my life with that was my equal, that we were doing things together, right? Because my husband had been sick for so long and, I was really parenting 4 children, or 3 kids and an adult. I was parenting, right? I wasn't partnered, I was doing the work. And so,
Mm,
I think that it's really all dynamics based on your kids' ages too. I mean, my children were quite young. They were 3, 6, and 8. So having conversations about repartnering was very, very different than having a teenage conversation, right? And I think that looks very different because
yeah.
teenagers are looking to date as well. Right. So you're maybe kind of getting a glimpse into it, but yet at the same time, you've got a lot of emotions around this. Whereas, not that younger kids don't have a lot of emotions, because they do and they have strong feelings about it, but you don't explain it the same way you would
Mm,
to maybe a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old because they
right.
aren't at that same maturity level of talking about dating or having a partner. So, I think talking about it is the most important thing. It's not necessarily what you say, but it's actually being willing to be open and have the conversation, no
Mm,
matter what their ages are, about why you're dating. And again, gauging them based on their age. So, having young children, you know, I started dating my now spouse. He was the only man I got to date after Mike died. So I got really lucky. I did not have to date a bunch of frogs. I just got really lucky and got the next best one right away, fresh out of the gate.
oh,
Um, so I mean, I started dating Jeff 3 months after Mike died, and was that in my plans? Gosh, no, that wasn't even. That was the furthest thing from my mind. But the opportunity presented itself. And I call it that because it really was, right? It wasn't something I went looking for. I wasn't going out with girlfriends looking to meet somebody. I was just there living my life, being a mom, trying to figure out what does my life look like now that I've got 3 little kids and I'm really all by myself other than extended family, but it's just me as the
yeah.
parent. And so, when that opportunity presented itself, I thought, it doesn't hurt to meet people, right? It doesn't hurt to make new friends. And having more friends never hurt anybody usually, right? So, I mean, I didn't look at it like dating. I didn't look at it like I'm going on a date, like romantically. I looked at it as I'm making a new friend and I'm getting to know
Mm,
more people. And I was really in the mode of self exploration, of trying to find who Lynn was, not as a mom, not as a widow, and definitely not as a spouse caregiver of an ill person. So I think
right.
that was really important for me, and that's why I think for me it was great because I got to meet someone new that didn't know me as any of those people, right? He didn't know my previous life, he only knew me as
Mm,
who I presented myself to. But talking to your kids about it, right? And just communication is, I think, the biggest thing, and saying, "Hey, here's what I'm doing." And they don't need to know the ins and outs depending on their age, but the older they are, I do think the more you communicate, at least at the basics, is really, really helpful for
yeah.
kids because when you just like anything else, if you don't explain stuff, they just make up stories in their head, I assume, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you're the kid as we're talking, you're not a kid now, but you're, well, maybe a little bit to me, you are, but I mean, your your perspective comes from being that child of loss. And I guess I mean, what would you say would be helpful for,
Yeah.
when you're going through it, then I think would be necessary for parents that are trying to coach their kids through it.
Sure. Well, and I loved what you said. There's a couple of things that I want to like highlight that feel like was so important. One, you kind of mentioned like you're alone, and I feel like that's something. Again, when you're a kid, you have never been in a relationship. You know what love is from like a book sense and like a story sense, and that's almost dangerous
True.
because the only love you know are like these fairy tale loves.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of running your parents' marriage through that screen of fairy tale. And my parents had a really good marriage. But where that fell apart and where that dissonance came from for me is I was like, okay, my parents had a good marriage. They supposedly were in love, but yet he's dating again. And so that must, that in my brain, I just remember thinking, my dad must not have loved my mom. And that kind of made me feel alone in my grief and angry. I was angry for her, which is ridiculous because I know she wanted my dad to date again. Didn't run that by me, but just kidding. But
Because
so
remember,
like
we're
that,
still the adults and we get to decide. Like
I
that's the part of
know.
it too, right? As a parent, I
Yeah,
mean, you're trying to make the decision at the time what you feel is best for you and for your children. And
right.
and can't speak for your dad, but he may have been looking at it as I found someone that I can spend time with that makes me
Yeah,
happy, but also can be a mother-like figure, not looking to replace your mom, but knowing, girls need women in their lives, right? And I'm
right.
sure he's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I know
Well,
that's
that's
how I feel with
exactly
boys. I'm like, ugh.
right. Well, that's exactly what my dad and I have talked a lot about this. So nothing I'm saying tonight is anything he
It's not
wouldn't
gonna
say
come as a
himself.
shocker for him.
Right. So he that's what he would say is he's like, I wanted my kids to have a mom and to have a mom like figure to help out. Like I'm drowning here in all this work. But of course, from like my perspective, I didn't see it that way. And
Sure.
so what I loved also about your kind of testimony with that is about how you still had deep love for your first husband. I felt like that maybe could have been communicated better. Like you said, like explain like, hey, I'm going on a date. But I would even take it a step further and say, like, and by the way, like that does not mean X, Y, and Z. And just
Right.
put that out there because I feel like that even
Sure.
adult children who's like adult 60 whatever year old parent, I've even heard stories of them having a hard time with it because like they're hurting so badly from the loss of their dad. They assume that with their mom redating, like it doesn't mean that. And so I just think getting that out in the open is, and your
Mhm.
other video, I think talks really well about that, about how you still very much love your first spouse and that's not that. And I just think that communication can clear up 90% of
Oh,
issues.
totally, I bet.
So I
Especially
love,
depending on the
yeah,
age, right? You're talking,
yeah,
the older the kid, the more likely you can have a really true conversation with. And not that you can't with
right.
a 6-year-old, but you have to temper it down just a little, right? And be like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going out with a friend and he's a friend of mine and I hope maybe he'll be a friend of yours someday, but we'll see where it
Oh,
goes, right? I
yeah.
mean, and I think that that's part of it too, is it's that street runs both ways, though. I think when it comes to having that conversation, right, as the widowed parent with your children, I think it's super important. But I also think that when you're talking about who it is that you're dating, needs to be very much on board with the fact that they're not a replacement, and they
Yeah.
need to know that from the beginning. And they maybe even need to express that if they can, because I think that's huge.
To
That
their
takes
kids, you
to the
mean?
children, right?
Yeah.
Like, so as we started to blend and as, my kids got to know Jeff, my second husband, it was, he would ask questions about Mike, like, tell me
Mm.
about your dad. Tell me about what, oh, and I think creating when the new partner can create an environment that helps the kids feel that they can speak clearly and loudly
Mhm.
still about their parent that is gone with no fear of like it making anyone uncomfortable,
Yeah.
then that's where that door swings wide open, right? And that's where then the comfort level is great for everybody because I think you can clear up a lot of misunderstandings there too, because if they think that that new significant other is there to replace said parent, then it kind of, or if they don't want to talk about them, or if they get uncomfortable, or if the new significant other gets weird every time a kid says something about their dad or mom, um, you know, then that creates a place that they don't want to share, right? That they don't
Very
want to talk.
hostile.
Whereas when the new significant other actually is the one engaging in those questions and asking, not in a prying way, but when the appropriate, like there was one time we were eating eggs and one of the kids said something about that their dad likes salsa and hot sauce on their eggs, and they're like, and Jeff followed up with, "Oh, really? That's interesting. I've never had that before. Do you like them that way too?" "No, I don't like spicy stuff." Again, they were little.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but those, interesting questions, or, "Oh, but how, what other things did he like to eat that you like to eat
Yes.
too?" And it just creates this conversation of, not only does your significant other then start to get to know your late spouse a little bit, because if they
Yeah.
are going to really stick around, that's kind of important, I think.
Right.
And, then at the same time, then it creates this environment for the kids to feel like they can share openly about their parent that they've lost without that fear of that new new significant other, or even second new bonus parent, feeling like
Right.
threatened by that environment, right? So
I'm like crying just because I think like everything you said is so good,
I'm like,
and
I feel so bad. I'm like, I wish I could hug you.
no, I cry all the time. These are happy tears because I think you hit the nail on the head. And of course, what's so difficult is a lot of people, like my ex stepmom and other people I've actually talked to, like their partners said they were okay with it, and then when they got into it, they kind of realized the magnitude of like, oh, this is like a lot, and like I'm divorced but she's widowed, and like this is different, like things like that.
Heavy, heavy baggage to carry.
It's a
And
lot.
the
And
right person is gonna show up. I mean,
yeah,
but
right. So everything you said was just so perfect about giving them talking and like keeping, I know you've mentioned in your other shows, keeping photos up, all that good stuff. But so to kind of, in addition to, I'm not here to replace, da 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 da, we also know that like grief is vulnerable. And I know like a big resistance of a lot of people, like in my side of the coin, when their parents get remarried, is they feel like they're never alone with their parent again. And this happens a lot with adult, like college age, high school age people, and they move in, and all of a sudden it's like every time I see my dad, he's with so and so, and
mhm.
and then you're not that close with so and so. And again, this is maybe a little bit more older kids with that
I
teenage,
think it's any age. I mean,
any
just
age,
thinking,
yeah.
especially if they're used, depending on how long mom or
Right.
dad was alone before they repartnered. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, mine was pretty short. And I mean, I'm okay with it. It's part of my story. It's part of my life. I have
Yeah.
no regrets about it because I'm living an amazing life because I
Yeah.
I jumped in feet first to something that wouldn't. I mean, I didn't think. I just did, and it worked out. Um but I think a lot of it, I mean, if I would have had 4 or 5 years alone with my kids, and by then they were, 8, 10, and 14 or whatever they would have been,
Right.
right? I think that definitely can impact because they do have more time, but making that time is super important still. I mean, even now.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was gonna kind of go with that question, because I love that perspective where, a lot of times kids kind of feel this is just like in things I get in my inbox all the time is like, my dad's dating again. And I feel like with the holidays coming around, we can't even talk about my mom because like his new girlfriend's always there. And I feel like there's just no space. And then that's of course in addition to all like the anger maybe they have with their parent dating in the first place.
Yeah.
So, for widowed people out there, is there any advice you would give them, whether it's like from your story or just other people you've heard, on like how to create still alone time that fosters some conversations um, with like just kind of like, I don't want to say your immediate family because I know everyone's part of the family, but with the
Totally get
original
it. Yeah.
group, because
Well,
I feel
I
like
think it
that's an
is
important
important
thing.
because it's hard sometimes. I mean, and we blended two parents with three kids each, right? And yes, my second husband is divorced, so their mom is very much alive, living,
Yeah.
and they live with her half the time. And I mean, they just have as kids, they have a different perspective, but they no longer have that also for them, right? Those three children no longer have one-on-one time with their dad either. So it can be for both parties. I think the big thing is we didn't take separate vacations, though I've heard that works great for some people. Not completely ever, but all the time. But we just there was one time I took my kids to the Dells for 3 days when Jeff was traveling for work. I mean, we didn't do that a lot in the beginning, but definitely have heard that's helpful. And honestly, it is enjoyable. I mean, it was kind of fun just to be the four of us, to go on a little trip and do that. We went to Myrtle Beach actually last summer, the four of us, because Jeff couldn't come. Right? It was just like, well, you can't come. Bummer for you. We're still going. But I do think creating those times too. So I think it's really important when you're blending and when you're trying to create that cohesive environment. I mean, obviously, the new significant other has to make the effort too, because mom should be able to be talked about, in my opinion, right, in front of the
Mhm.
girlfriend or whatever, or boyfriend, right? Like they should just, those conversations should be able to be had. Because honestly, I just think if if you are stepping into a relationship where their spouse is gone, and deceased, you should let the people in that house be able to talk about that space should be. And if you're uncomfortable with that as the new girlfriend, boyfriend stepping in, then you probably shouldn't be dating someone like that.
Yeah.
Like if you're so threatened, or so worried about being threatened by someone that's dead, right? Like if you're jealous of someone that's dead, then you need to work on you for a while. That's,
Right. Right.
so if anybody's listening that's dating someone, maybe, take a breath if you're jealous or are having issues about that.
Yeah.
But, I do think taking time, whether it's finding coffee dates if you have older kids, right, meeting them for lunch and one-on-one time is still really important. Like not bringing your spouse to every time you go and meet the kids or you go to visit them at college, or, we get a lot of alone car time, right? Because I now more of them drive than not. But, at some point I was driving them everywhere. So, we got a lot of car time and time between tournaments out of necessity because we had to, but that created an environment where they still had one-on-one time, right?
Mhm.
We still spent time together as a family and we did things for the holidays. We always do that. But, I think each family unit is different, but I think making time for each one, right? And saying, okay, this is an occasion where all of us are together because this person is important in my life too. Um, and you, as my children, are important in my life, right? So I'm collectively creating an environment that is good for everybody to be heard or to be a part of and build a relationship. But then there's also times where, okay, especially I think if you've got kids that are older and you can create that environment where I'm going to go visit my children or I'm going to meet them for lunch. Sweetie, I love you. I think, I want you to be a part of my life, but I need to have some one on one time with them as well. And again, I think that
Yeah.
goes back to a lot of how much time did they have with you as a parent alone before they repartnered? My kids didn't have a lot of alone time with me, so I don't know if they really recognized that that was something they needed, right? Like,
Sure.
I mean, because it was like, well, here we are, we went from a five-person family to a four-person family, and then pretty soon, kind of rapidly, I mean, we went to an eight-person family. And
Right.
and it didn't mean that we didn't hear them or we didn't want them to be heard or have that time, but I do think a lot of that kind of necessity is born out of how long and how old they are, right?
Mhm.
Whereas when they're younger, there's maybe less, they're like, whatever, a person's just here.
Right.
That's how it goes. So,
Yeah. No, and I love that, and I think that's in my motherless daughters group that I'm a part of, and just like a lot of other kids who do that. That's like their biggest thing is they just feel like they don't get enough space. So I love what you said about creating space, creating alone time, and with the holidays coming up, I just feel like I mean I've got a whole song about lighting a candle ceremony. I talk about holidays stuff all the time, but for anybody listening out there who's kind of like, okay, I'm trying to do the blend thing, and that's a exhausting task sometimes. What I would just encourage you to do is just set, maybe it's not on Thanksgiving, but a day before where it's just a couple hours, but I would be intentional about that time and of course read the room, but just be like, hey guys, like I would love to talk about your dad or your mom right now. And like this is our time to like share that stuff. And like we're gonna have a big family gathering later on. You're more than welcome to bring them up then. But like now is the time to talk and just like create that safe space and that memory sharing space,
Mhm.
I think is so valuable because it proves you still care and that it's like not like forcing this down their throat because a lot of kids, especially the older they get, they don't want that. But and I think at any age though, knowing that their parent is still important to their current parent
Mhm.
is so important. And I think that's again, that's just all it's this part of the story of my love for them didn't stop. But I
Right.
would challenge parents like, how are you showing that? Like kids don't go off of words. They don't trust your words. They're going to trust your actions.
Right.
So that's what I would just say. And my dad did such a good job. So the situation with my dad and my ex stepmom was a very contentious one, but he tried his darndest, and now we do tons of stuff. And my dad's current girlfriend is amazing, and there's so much good. But I just know the blending of family. I didn't trust them. They were not my brothers. There was three of us, three of them. They were
Mhm.
older. They were not bad people, but it was just like I never felt safe enough to express anything
Sure.
with them because it was just was not cool. So it would have been nice to have some more separated out time. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, that again, back to wisdom, I feel like that's just like an easy thing. It's not to be offended. It's not anyone's
Right.
offended. It's just a good thing to have some alone time. So I guess my final question as we kind of wrap up our half hour here, and I wish I could talk to you all day because
That's
we
why
have
we just
so
schedule
much.
these and we have
I
conversations.
know, I know. And so I guess the last thing that I just wanted to kind of share, maybe we both can kind of have like our final statements, especially with the holidays coming around, of like, are there any words of wisdom you have for a widowed person? And maybe I'll share mine for like a child too, out there with kids at home. And you're like, here's my last little pat of encouragement on the back.
I think for in general, I think it's as long as you are taking the moment to say that you're whatever your decision is right at that moment is really being made in the best interest of you, your children, the people in your life, then you're making the best decision at that moment for yourself, right? You may look back 10 years and go, "Ooh, I would have made a different decision." Well, you also have 10 more years of wisdom behind you. So don't look back. Don't go, "Ooh, I wish I don't have any regrets," but make the best decision right now for everyone that's in your life. And you'll be making the best. I mean, if you're making the what you believe to be the best decision, then it is the best decision. When it comes to repartnering and the holidays and all of that, I mean, it's been 10 years, and I would by far say that I didn't know this 8 years ago. I didn't probably know this 5 years ago. I think 10 years has brought on a lot more wisdom and a lot more grace, coming from me, but everybody grieves differently. Everybody grieves differently. Whether they live in the same household as you, they might be grieving the same person as you, they might not be, they might be grieving something else, but everybody grieves differently than you. So, and everybody's story is different. So, give everybody just a little extra grace as we walk through the holidays. Give yourself a lot of extra grace. um, but give everybody else in the room. I mean, everybody has some baggage and a mess and whatever they got going on. And if we all just take a deep breath and you just go, you know what they said may not be really directed at me, or their behavior may not be really directed at me, it will save a whole lot of heartache on a lot of people's parts. Because, even the kids, even your children, they're grieving, but they might be grieving something completely different than what you think they are. So don't assume either. Like, if you want to really know, ask the question, right? Talk to them, whether they're little kids or they're big grown up kids. And it shouldn't be confrontational, but, asking the questions and, not like, hey, what's your problem about this? You shouldn't probably talk. I mean, I might talk to one of my kids like that mostly because that's how we banter back and forth and that's how we get along. But, it's just that whole, if we can give each other a lot of space and grace, and then we just know that they grieve differently and we ask questions when we want to know things, that really will help, as we move through this holiday season, especially. obviously any time of the year, but now is there's a lot of emotions, right? We've got a lot of feelings, we've got a lot of memories, we've got a lot of everything that starts to bubble up. We all ate too much, we all drank too much, we all, didn't get enough sleep. All those things, there's so many factors that are coming into play when we talk about the holidays, and it's hard. And nothing else ever going to be perfect, even when you thought it was, if you look back, right? Like I think about, oh, when Mike was alive, was it perfect? No, no holiday was ever perfect. I had three little kids running around screaming and acting like terrors. Nothing was ever
Right.
perfect, right? So you just have to kind of go with it and just give everybody that breath, and mostly yourself more than anything. Give yourself a lot of grace.
Oh, well, then thank you so much. I loved everything you said. And then I would just kind of say to any child out there, whether you are 10 years old or you're 25 or 30 years old or 45 years old, I just want you to know that it is absolutely possible to still have alone time with your kind of core group of who you grew up with, who you're comfortable with, and add new blessings into your life. If the right people will be the right blessings. And it's okay. Both can exist at the same time. Like you can still have alone time and talk about your mom and all that stuff. And you can welcome in these new people. And like Lyn said, hopefully your parent is doing due diligence and like really drilling in to make sure it's the right person. You're not always going to get that card dealt to you like I didn't. But you know what? At the same time, though, like it's going to be okay. Like it's okay to grieve your parent. And I would just kind of, the thesis of the whole night is like, remember you're grieving them as a parent and no one can replace your parent. Like that's like, you know what I mean? Like they can come in, you can have parental figures. And at the same time, like your parent is grieving a spouse that they chose. Like no one forced them to be together. And while no one can replace that spouse either, it's a good love, but it's a very different relationship. And it's okay. They will always love your first parent. And just like how, as we're learning in our own lives, like love is something that you're going to crave for forever. So don't feel like, oh, because they want to date again and feel pretty and wanted and like just have a friendship again, doesn't mean they don't love your parents. Sorry, I'm like crying because this is just so
True,
what we
though.
all need to hear.
So
And it's
true.
okay for you to tell your parent, hey, I would love some alone time with you. I love your girlfriend. She's great. Can I get a little bit of one-on-one time? And I think that's the big thing is give them space and then give your parents grace and space, right?
Grace and space. Hey, it
Yeah,
goes a long way in every relationship, no matter
right.
what.
Yeah, so that'd be my message is both can coexist. Like your parent still loves your other parent. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
message that so many kids need to hear because they don't feel it a lot. So I'm bawling my eyes out. It must just be that type of a week because I really feel fine right now. But I am so grateful for you, Lyn. Thank you so much for being here. I think everything you said was so perfect and right on point and exactly what everyone needed to hear. So thank you again. I am so
I
grateful
always
for
love
you.
talking to you. It's always great conversation. And, I think of it as if one person that listens to this hears something that they can take and it helps them in their grief and their loss, then we help someone, right? And I would love to come back anytime you want. And
Oh, yeah.
maybe we should do like a fun Q&A sometime, like on your podcast. We can get together
I
and
would
we
love
can
that.
like people can submit random fun widow parent love questions. Not that I'm an
Yes.
expert by any means. I have no clue what I'm doing. I just, play one on TV. But, I'm just doing the best I can with what I got right now. The knowledge I got
Yeah.
today.
Well, and I think Lyn too, like what I love. Sorry, we can talk way too loud. I'm gonna wrap. I'm gonna wrap it up. But your story gives me hope. My dad's, and I love my dad so much. And he's the first to admit, like, it did not go great, and there was a lot of red flags that were perhaps looked because he was so in the trenches and
Sure.
so overwhelmed with everything that I think the red flags were just kind of passed
Ignored.
by. But like you are living proof that like it is possible to have a blended family that works well, that has space for grief. And it's just so beautiful. I just wish everybody could see you because I think it just gives me so much hope for all the people, all the families out there who are like, will this ever work out? And the answer is it can. Look at Lyn.
But it takes work. It doesn't come cheap or
Right.
easy. It
It
takes
doesn't
work.
come easy, but it is possible. So, Lyn, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you for
Thank
watching. We are
you for
so
having me.
grateful for you. Ask those questions in the comments, and I'll make notes for when Lyn and I have our next our next session. So, bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having me.